Hello, and welcome to another fully live Friday episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we have my good friend and fellow hacker Alex on to help go over the hacker news of the week. Hello to everybody joining us in the chat, and we have lots of stuff to cover today. So Alex, thanks for joining us again.
Of course.
So first off, we'd like to kind of check in and see what's going on with both of us, since we are both security researchers and we're always working on new things. And we have a little bit of news to share, which is kind of exciting, and that is that next week we are going to be hosting our Q&A stream on the Hack5 channel. So pretty exciting, huh? So
yeah.
If you have any questions that you want to ask, you should probably get them in early for that particular Q&A stream on the YouTube channel, because we are going to be streaming to like 700,000 people potentially. Of course, not all the subscribers to Hack5 are going to be showing up, but the chat's going to be pretty crazy. So we're looking forward to it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when we do our stream, but with like thousands of people contributing potentially. So yeah, if you want to stay tuned for a very crazy Q&A chat on Tuesday, then that is a very exciting thing that we get to do. And I figure we get a lot of questions on our Hack5 videos anyway. It would be great to be able to also broadcast on that channel. So expect a lot of new people on the stream that we're going to be doing on Tuesday. So very cool. And of course, we value all of you as well. And we will be streaming to our normal platforms as well. So if you stay tuned to the Security Forward channel, you'll see us just as usual, but also maybe with a lot of other people coming in from the Hack5 channel.
I also heard we might be featuring a special Hack5 guest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you guys have ever heard of Darren Kitchen, the creator of the Hack5 channel, then he's going to be coming on as our special guest on our Q&A. So if you have any questions for Darren Kitchen, he's going to be talking about some new payloads, I believe, that have come out that are really, really cool. And we are going to have him available for you to ask questions live, or of course, submit your questions early so we can get them queued up and ready to go. So hello to everybody in the chat as well. I see we have extra people on the LinkedIn today, so hello. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the InfoSec news of the day. So one thing to note, and so far as what Alex and I do in our free time, is that we do some 3D printing. And I, if you switch over to my screen, have been doing a lot of printing of spaghetti over the last couple of days. We work with Creality Ender 3 printers, and currently I was trying to print a case for our Wi-Fi nugget, and instead I ended up printing myself a spaghetti dinner. So if this has ever happened to you, I'm very sorry. This is my third day of making various types of spaghetti, and hopefully we have that fixed soon. But aside from making spaghetti, I also went ahead and made one of our Wi-Fi nuggets, but with a swappable antenna. So what that means is you could potentially go ahead and take this Wi-Fi nugget and connect it to a like a Yagi antenna or a panel antenna, and then use it as a fox hunting device to track down the signal of basically any Wi-Fi device around you. So if you want to know if that neighbor's maybe connecting to your Wi-Fi network and there's this device on your network that you don't know what it is, well, you could use this to track it down really quickly by using that kind of directional signal strength, almost like a spotlight, to go around and look for spikes in signal strength as you walk around. So we've only made one of these because they are honestly pretty tricky to make. You have to move a very, very tiny resistor that's the size of a grain of sand. But creating one of these like advanced fox hunting nuggets is really cool and was a lot of fun. So that's what I've been working on this week. Alex, what about you?
I've mostly been working on the Rubber Nugget implementation in CircuitPython, touching up some of the code that you were previously working on. I've been working on the web interface for that, and also just polishing up the main interface so that way you can like navigate and select different payloads directly on your Wi-Fi nugget.
What's also cool is we've created, I think, almost 200 Wi-Fi nuggets under the strict supervision of course, the original Wi-Fi nugget, or just I guess the original nugget. So it's been a pretty wild ride over the last week or two, creating so many of these printed circuit boards and then getting ready to ship them off as a official Hack5 tool. So it's been really, really cool kind of working on that process and getting everything done. And on top of that, we of course have been putting out Hack5 videos as well. So Alex, you want to talk about your video from last week, which has gotten a ton of traction, by the way. It's got a lot of views and a lot of discussion on it.
I think it's mostly due to that cute cat-shaped circuit board that we got to feature.
Of course.
Yeah, this actually does feature the Rubber Nugget that I was talking about. So this is basically a software we've been working on for the Wi-Fi Nugget that allows you to deploy DuckyScript payloads. So DuckyScript is basically just a simple language that allows you to utilize keystroke injection in order to inject like malicious payloads into a computer or something like that, since computers will inherently trust keyboards, and this works by emulating a keyboard that like types payloads at incredible speeds. So the Rubber Nugget is an implementation we worked on for the Wi-Fi Nugget that allows you to quickly deploy some of these payloads. And in this video, I showcased how PwnKit can be leveraged in order to gain root access on a Linux machine. And PwnKit was an exploit I think we talked about a few weeks ago that utilizes a Linux tool called pkexec, which is used for like handling user authentication in applications and stuff like that. But basically there was a memory error, or rather there's an error in how pkexec handles stuff like command line arguments that are passed to it, where an attacker can pass it like malformed command line arguments, which causes it to have a memory overflow, which then leads to pkexec then creating a root instance. So then you can essentially just use that in order to run arbitrary commands on a Linux terminal. So if you want to skip ahead in my video, we can show off part of the
the payload
demonstration.
Yeah. So the payload executing from the Wi-Fi Nugget is honestly pretty cool if it will play. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. So we can see in the background, it's, well, you can narrate. You wrote it.
So it's basically just injecting a bunch of commands. The first thing it does is it disables user input over keyboard and like the user's trackpad. So once this payload starts running, the user has like no way to disable it. You can see it runs the pkexec exploit. It changes the root password, and then it runs this really annoying payload, which starts flashing a color show on your screen, and then starts a rickroll.
And of course, there's no way to recover from this because you can't type anything. And if you restart your computer, then you're locked out because the root password's been changed. So this was a pretty nasty little payload that Alex wrote. And it shows off how you can use privilege escalation to really make one of these fast access attacks just a nightmare for whoever gets hit with it. So if you have a Linux machine, watch out, because just a couple seconds alone with Alex and a nugget could lead to this video being played endlessly on your computer and then no way into it as soon as you reboot.
And a free color show.
And a free color show, yeah. I like that. I like that add-on. So then just yesterday, I came out with a video that I'm really proud of. I look kind of stoic about it, but no, this video is really great. And this is about cracking a deliberately vulnerable stay logged in cookie. So if I check it on YouTube, it's not quite where Alex's is yet. It's only got 5,000, but it just came out yesterday. So the point of this is that we learn how to use a feature that is added for convenience. Like if you've ever seen that little check form kind of box underneath your login that says stay logged in or remember this computer, that will set a cookie that allows you to log into parts of the website that require you to be authenticated, like maybe your profile settings page. In this example, we go ahead and use OWASP Zap, which is a free and open source tool that is amazing. It's actually so much more powerful and so much easier to use than I thought it was. It's just so poorly documented sometimes. And the rival to this, Burp Suite, is also a really great tool that has outstanding documentation, but you know, it's a little expensive, and I got a free pro license to be able to experiment with it and play around with it. And right when I was about to do this video, my license ran out and nobody responded to me in time. So I went ahead and used OWASP Zap, and I was amazed by how cool it was. So if you've never used OWASP Zap before, if you've never done web application pen testing, you should check this out, because this whole video is 11 minutes long, and we go through and explain how you can figure out how these stay logged in cookies are crafted and then use them to brute force your way into someone's account without having to hit maybe the brute force protections that might be in place if you were going to try to brute force their login by just, you know, logging in with a bunch of password guesses. So this is a really cool example of how to do payload processing. It's a cool example of how to attack something once you understand it, and the various tools that are at your disposal in OWASP Zap. So I really love this video. I thought it was one of my favorites I've done in a while, and you should check it out if you're at all interested in web application pen testing, because I think it's a great beginner guide to OWASP Zap, and the lab on this is actually really fun. So that is something you should take a look at if you haven't seen already.
What I like about this is every tool you demonstrate here is completely free. And
yes.
Yeah. I also liked the CircuitPython implementation you were working on. Do you have any plans for possibly implementing this one too in the future?
Yeah, so there was one point where I was trying to do one of these labs I was excited about, and I found out that the Portswigger lab was down. So I wanted to create a hardware version of this where you could make your own vulnerable web server in CircuitPython and be able to run it on any CircuitPython board that has Wi-Fi. And there's a bunch of CircuitPython boards that do have Wi-Fi, including the Wi-Fi Nugget.
Right.
So I went ahead and made a vulnerable web application that lets you brute force a username and then a password. And I was thinking about also having a vulnerable stay logged in cookie for maybe like a second stage of the game or a second kind of variant of it. But either way, yeah, I definitely am thinking about having this kind of like encoding-based lab featured inside of a Wi-Fi Nugget vulnerable application. That way, you know, if like the lab up online goes down, then you guys can still play around with it in your own homes and not get in trouble, because if you're hacking a Wi-Fi Nugget or something like that, then, you know, if you succeed, you just get a little light show and an excited face, not sent to prison potentially. Right. You know, if it's like a business's Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
All right, so I also wanted to shout out a couple interesting tools that have come out. So one of them is called WhoLeaked. So this is a file sharing tool that allows you to figure out if someone is leaking. And that means that this is kind of watermarking the document in a way that allows you to determine who was the one that passed this along. And this is a really interesting tool because this is a problem that comes up where people might be sharing files or leaking intellectual property. And if you wanted to watermark this in a predictable way that's also free, I thought that this was a really cool way of doing a little bit of digital forensics on files that you might suspect are being leaked. That way you can distribute different versions to different people, and every time you make a new sharing link or a new like sharing document, then you'll be able to embed it with something that'll let you know the source of where it came from. So really interesting little tool and very helpful. And then another one is Unredactor. So Alex, I think you were actually going to talk about this one a little bit.
Oh yeah, so this is let me see if I have the article pulled up. This is a pretty cool tool that allows you to basically recover text from pixelated images. Let me see if I can.
Why are you on Alex's screen? Go on mine. He's still looking. Oh, there you go.
Okay, wait, here it is. All right, whatever.
All right.
There have been previous tools that were used to do this before, like dpix, which is actually one that I used before, that just uses like a static algorithm to detect text that's detected from certain char sets or certain font types. But I think what's cool about this one is it uses machine learning in order to pull like the best guess. Okay, let me find something that's not creepy faces. It actually uses machine learning to pull the best guess from this depixelated image rather than like a static algorithm that's tuned to like a specific font type or font size or stuff like that. But basically, this researcher was able to use this in order to decode text from some sort of challenge here. I don't know if you have more information on this.
No, so what's cool about this tool also is that a lot of people will choose to use one of the default blur tools in order to make it so that you can very quickly redact something while making the document look more or less, you know, not like it's completely blacked out. Right. And a lot of the time, like press will do this, where they'll like blur out someone's information when they're putting up something like an ID card or something on the screen. But obviously, keeping that information in there, but like lightly scrambled with a predictable algorithm, is not the best way to obfuscate it. So without, you know, a certain amount of randomness interjected into it, which would frankly make it like pretty unusable, I don't know that I would recommend this as a way of hiding information. So if you've like posted a copy of like your credit card, but you've like blurred out details, or if you've posted a picture of your ID and you've blurred out details, you should delete that.
Yeah.
Probably now, because these tools are getting more and more powerful, and there have already been several tools that have purported to do this, and a lot of them actually work pretty well. But you would be amazed at how many times I've gone on social media and seen people I know sharing like work badges and IDs that they just got and like certifications they just got and stuff with their critical details blurred out using one of these free apps or some other tool that allows you to very quickly apply a blur to it, but it's not redacted. Like one of the reasons why the government uses big black lines to redact information is because you can't reverse engineer that at all. Most of the time. There was some cases of improper redaction where somebody attempted to redact documents with big black lines, and instead they just applied like a filter over it, and it was like still a PDF. So anybody could just remove the filter or just highlight over it. Oh, that was another good one. There was also a case where people tried to redact with black lines, but instead it made it so you could just highlight over it and copy the text and paste it. Oh, nice. So like you couldn't see the text, but you could copy and paste the text still because it was still actually there. So I take it back that like, you know, like blacking out a document is like a foolproof thing in order to get rid of the information, because people have still messed that up. But I will say that with these blur techniques coming out that are really, really getting more popular, more free, and more powerful, you should probably not post any information. And if you have family members that are posting this, a scammer could get a hold of them and then use that information to contact them personally and trick that person into thinking that they they know them or have some official reason to contact them. So this is a danger to people who feel comfortable sharing information when it is obfuscated this way. And I just wanted everyone to be aware that these tools are out there, they're becoming very popular, and it's not a secure method to just blur your stuff in this way anymore. So if you have friends or family that are still doing this, feel free to point them to this tool, and they'll probably, hopefully, want to go back and delete those, work documents that they hastily redacted that could get them in trouble.
Yeah, I actually tried this tool that they show here, which is dpix. This one uses you have to generate a trained set on specific font types, so it requires you to first recognize the type of font that you want to deblur and stuff like that. And it works pretty well, but as you can see here, it says there's some minor variations and noise that throws a wrench into the gears. So there's obviously some problems with this one, but this tool is pretty scary. It uses machine learning and seems pretty accurate.
Yeah, and a couple of people in the chat were pointing out that if somebody uses a marker as a redaction tool, you can keep just jacking up the brightness until the underlying text peeks through, and that can give you critical clues for figuring out words or even reading the entire thing. Yeah. So yes, there's definitely ways where this can go wrong, and people have over time hit just about all of them. But I will say that for now, it looks like using a blur-based tool to redact documents or post something that maybe you don't want all of it to be public, that should no longer be a thing anymore. If you put a sticker over it of an eggplant or something, whatever you kids are doing, that's probably a better way, and then exporting as a JPEG, that's more secure right now than blurring it. So just do the eggplant or whatever you guys do,
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Yes, that is my official suggestion. It's no longer secure to use a blur. Upgrade to an eggplant emoji.
How many eggplants do you need to cover a document, though?
A lot. It's just going to be a farm.
Just replace every single character with an eggplant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then I have a general question for everybody in the chat or anybody joining us, because somebody tagged me in this, and there was just what would you do with this? So yeah, if you came up on something that washed up on the beach and it was plug-inable, would you just go and plug it in? And if so, where would you plug it in? My answer? The nearest hotel business center computer.
Yes.
My favorite victim for plugging things in that I don't trust. Followed closely by my nearest photo center kiosk. That is also a great computer to plug things you don't trust into. Alex, what about you? Where would you plug this into?
A wall outlet.
What? Oh, so actually that's not as dumb as it sounds, because do you want to
Oh my God,
do you want to explain the thing that you did one time that actually worked out pretty well?
Yeah, so I made a thing that essentially discharges USB rubber duckies, which are the attack platform for keystroke injection. So basically I had a hardware keylogger. I plugged that into a USB wall outlet, and then I just plugged a USB rubber ducky into it. So essentially the rubber ducky's getting power. It injects the keystrokes,
yeah.
But then the keylogger picks up those keystrokes, so I'm able to recover them and see what the payload was, or rather what the payload was trying to run. Yeah.
It sounds it sounds ridiculous, but the fact that you could plug in a wall outlet and then plug in a payload delivery device and see what the payload was without ever endangering a real computer is pretty genius in my opinion.
It's one of the dumbest things I've ever conceived
That's one of
of
the most hacker things I've ever heard of, because I didn't even think of that, and when Alex mentioned it, I was just who in their right mind would think they could plug a USB stick into a wall outlet and get any sort of result out of it? Turns out if you put a hardware keylogger in serial, then it actually does work.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so if you have any other ideas, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm curious what you would do. Okay, so then we have my favorite story of this entire stream, and I think Alex and I are both going to cover it a little bit. But dad takes down town's internet by mistake to get kids offline.
Nice.
I'm just
dad move.
Yeah, classic dad move. I think it's really funny when news headlines specify that someone's a dad or a mom, that has bearing on what happened. But in this case, it actually sort of does, because I guess the goal was to kick the kids offline without realizing that they were causing devastation. So we have sometimes been accused of showing people how to jam internet, but it's not quite the same, because when we talk about jammers, there are different types of jammers, and the way that they work is very important. So a jammer, in the sense of this news story, is something that puts out a bunch of interference on the channels that devices typically use in order to get data. So that means they put out so much noise or so much interference that a cell phone or a computer cannot connect via Wi-Fi or cannot connect via cellular data because it's just overwhelmed with noise, and it drowns out its ability to hear the signal it's listening for. These sorts of jammers are crazy illegal because they prevent people from calling 911, they prevent people from doing general business tasks, and they're a denial of service attack that is really, really broad. It does not discriminate whatsoever. It affects every single device in the area. So this is the super illegal kind of jammer where if you were to go and buy one somewhere where you can find one, like probably China, then you could get one, but operating one would certainly bring down a lot of attention on you. Alex and I have often shown off how to use microcontrollers to jam Wi-Fi, but this is what's called a protocol-based jammer, where we're sending valid packets to a specific device, but that the device processing the packet is what causes the problem, basically. So it doesn't affect any other devices except the one device that you are intending to attack, and that makes it a much more targeted and often legal attack to do when you're targeting a specific device. So a lot of people don't understand that distinction, and it's useful to point it out when we cover a story like this, because when people talk about deauthing and Wi-Fi jamming, they're probably not talking about this, because this took out Wi-Fi and also cellular for an entire town. Alex, you want to discuss some of the details?
I didn't actually know that. I thought he just took down Wi-Fi, but that's intense.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so this is a graph displaying the signature of the signal jammer, and this got so bad that the carrier had to report this to the agency responsible for investigating these sorts of problems. And the jammer had been installed by the father of a family to prevent his teenagers from accessing the internet with their smartphones instead of falling asleep. But my favorite part about this is that the investigating agency also apparently does diagnoses, because it follows his children had indeed become addicted to social networks and other applications, in particular since the confinement imposed due to the epidemic of COVID-19.
They're trying to sympathize a little.
I guess, but it's still funny to be like, in our opinion, these children are addicted to the internet, and what he did was reasonable.
Yeah.
So this is an actual picture of the Siege Jammer. I've seen this. This is the nice version. This one's like $800 or $900 on an unknown Chinese marketplace I will not mention. But if you can get them past customs, I mean, it is relatively easy to get these, and people not knowing how illegal they are or how easy it is to detect these will install them in all sorts of places. Places where they can be legally installed are like prisons and other areas there where it's strictly forbidden to have cell phones. But in most cases, because it causes people not to be able to call for help, it is a really serious thing to be caught using one of these. So as you can see, this dad is in the process of getting in a lot of trouble and could face up to 6 months in jail and a 30,000 euro fine. Sounds like a lot of American dollars.
Yes.
So yeah, don't take down your entire town's internet by trying to prevent your children from getting online, I guess is the message. And also, like, this is literally like a parenting feature that's like built into the phone nowadays, where you can like disable it or like do certain things to it as a parent, like if you know about it. So this dad really should have just looked up, you know, how to limit children's screen time instead of buying a super illegal device that could have prevented one of his neighbors from contacting emergency services if they had a heart attack or something. Because, like, who has a landline anymore? Like, so if suddenly nothing works around you, what are you going to do? Drive to the hospital? Like, you might have to if nothing's working. So
I just love this sarcastic line. After consulting forums on the internet, the father decided that a jammer was the best solution to put an end to these excesses.
What forums? Nice. 4chan? Like that. This is not a good idea. This is not a good idea. Okay, so note to all dads: this is not a good idea, and can land you in jail, French jail, for 6 months. I don't know how many months of American jail, but probably a lot.
Sounds like a lot, though.
All right, Alex, what do you got next?
All right, sure. And let me see. What do I have? Okay. Google Drive flags this macOS metadata file for copyright violation. We actually saw a pretty interesting piece the other week where files that were named like arbitrary numbers, I think, were getting also flagged for copyright infringement. But now it seems that the macOS.ds_store file, which stores metadata about certain macOS files that I honestly don't know a lot about, are being flagged for copyright infringement. It's not an easily replicated bug, but it seems like it has something that it might have something to do with hash collision, or there's actually nothing that's entirely attributed to this issue, but Google is saying that this is a strange edge case that they're trying to reproduce and find out what's wrong with. But yeah.
So this also basically only affects macOS users, because this is also a big problem, because macOS will automatically create this additional hidden file in file structures that you don't see as a Mac user, but the second you upload something to GitHub, for example, it just appears. And then we have to go and delete it. And the same thing with CircuitPython. There's just these random files that show up when I'm on a Windows or Linux device that I don't see on macOS. So those files being pasted accidentally can apparently cause some sort of issue, which is really frustrating, because as a macOS user, you really don't have any control over where this is put. I also have to say, there's lots of chat about the jammer going on, and some of it is very funny. One person was mentioning that they've changed the name of these from jammers to blockers, and that they basically market these as ways of getting around tracking. So if your boss is tracking you with a GPS, this is a way to take back control. Or if your scary ex is tracking you and you just want to be free again, this is a way of preventing trackers from following you. But that's still illegal. If you drove by an airport, blocking GPS signals would get you in huge trouble. And that has happened several times. In fact, this happened with a truck driver who was driving around with a GPS jammer so he could take breaks without his boss knowing what he was doing. So,
Nice.
People trying to use these for even their new marketing purpose, where you know what it's for, but they market them as blockers and GPS blockers when it's the exact same product. Even when you're using it for that seemingly benign edge case, you're still committing a huge crime, and often people get busted for this by causing massive outages at airports and other stuff that relies on this sort of technology. And someone also points out, these are funny that they're sold as anti-tracking devices. It's technically true, but it's like saying that burning your house down will prevent it from getting burglarized. That is a very astute way of putting that. Thank you, Leo, for that breakdown. And someone else says, it did work. I was like, yes, okay, that's true. Aside from taking out an entire town's internet, they did successfully prevent their children from getting online, a feat that some parents might say is pretty remarkable. So, in most cases, I will find cases of people trying to get their kids off of the internet, but then their kids posting to Twitter from their smart fridge. So it can be really challenging, I understand, to get teenagers offline. But in this case, I think that they might have gone a little too far.
Using a jammer to just jam the whole frequency is scorched earth.
Yes, it definitely is. All right, so let's talk about GitHub's new scanning. So GitHub, if you've never heard of it, is a place for developers to share code, and a lot of code that's being distributed or projects that are being worked on is stored on GitHub. And one advantage is GitHub can offer some security add-ons or some security options that might not be available to individual programmers who are just working on something and putting it out there. And one thing that they're proposing to do is to use machine learning to scan code and look for common vulnerabilities to alert developers in the early stages when their code has problems in it that could be exploited. Now, this is something that, as far as I know, it hasn't really been done before on GitHub. So being able to automatically get a notification that maybe your code contains a vulnerability you've never heard of that could be exploited and leave your users vulnerable, that's pretty remarkable. And for an attacker, being able to copy and paste some other person's code into this and automatically find vulnerabilities kind of sounds nice too, now that I'm thinking of it.
Yeah. They did have a feature where they looked for outdated libraries that were being used and stuff like that. I noticed that before, but this is definitely going to be a great change. I'd also like to see I noticed there's just a ton of credentials that are still just out there floating on GitHub. They should probably do something about that too, which I presume this might handle.
So GitRob is a good example of a tool that all it does is look for exposed API keys, credentials, other things that might allow an attacker to have some sort of leverage into a network. And often there's so much code base being put on GitHub that a lot of it kind of slips through. I will admit to posting test credentials on GitHub all the time. Yeah. So unfortunately, it's just my test Wi-Fi network, and I don't care and won't be judged about what my credentials are. But it it could be much more serious if it was instead like some internal API or something else that could give an attacker access to do something bad. So this is still a problem that comes up all the time when people are releasing code, and GitHub offering this code scanning option means that at least some of these really, really basic mistakes could be caught early on and make everything a bit more secure. And I really like this example of what this looks like: client-side cross-site scripting, medium severity, uncontrolled data, use in path expression, high. This is all really cool. Like, that gives you the ability to know, okay, there could be something really serious here, but also as a developer, I have no idea what this means. So hopefully there's a good explanation as well.
Looks like they scan for stuff like remote code execution, SQL injection, cross-site scripting. Yeah, that's all good stuff.
Yeah, it really is, because these are some of the most common vulnerabilities that are out there. And I was going through like the OWASP top 10, which are supposed to show off what kinds of vulnerabilities are the most severe and most widespread. And a lot of these, well, actually, I think all of these were covered in that. So really, really interesting feature. You can try it out by looking at the experimental features, because it's not turned on by default. But if you're interested in seeing what kind of bugs your code might contain, then you could get the first report from GitHub instead of some security researcher, which might save you some money, right?
Yeah.
All right. You want to go next?
Sure, yeah, I can take this. Okay, cool. Attackers can crash Cisco email security appliances by sending malicious emails. So apparently certain Cisco devices, these email security appliance devices, which handle processing emails, have an issue where if an attacker is using like a malformed or like fake DNS server or something like that, they can basically just send an email from this invalid like domain name, and this will basically just crash the service that's running on these devices. And if they're able to persistently keep on sending these emails, they're able to completely just shut down or crash some of these security appliances, thus resulting in a denial of service. So this affects a whole bunch of Cisco devices.
So the score on that was like 7.9, did it say?
No, I think it's a 9.8.
Oh.
At least on a different site. This one says 7.5, but I saw it was
still
9.8 on a different one. That's still pretty high,
really
though.
high. Yeah, so that, I mean, even a denial of service could be really critical and could be coordinated with other attacks that would make that really, really devastating.
Yeah, this one's also fairly trivial, it seems. All it requires is just having a domain name that's unable to be processed in the right way by these email security appliances, and it's just as simple as like persistently sending out emails to these ESA devices.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, another attack involving a denial of service on something really critical. What do you think would be the most critical thing for people to have access to during, a day-to-day basis? Probably their money. So apparently in Canada, there was a hours-long outage of major banking services, and people aren't really sure if this is related to the recent emergency declaration or the recent powers that have been activated to try to go after people who might have been participating in the demonstration that's currently causing Canada to get very upset. But a lot of customers were reporting that ATMs were down. There were lots of outages reported for these banking sectors, and on Twitter they were in kind of apology mode, trying to figure out what was going on while dealing with angry customers. There are also pictures of ATMs not working and online transfers not working. So it looks like these sorts of attacks are not only like very rattling for consumers, because suddenly you can't make any purchases. You have to basically cancel whatever thing you were planning on doing. There's no real explanation for what happened here. Oh, it looks so cold. Oh, it is Canada. But anyway, so it's a little mysterious as to what really happened here, because not a lot of details have come out yet. It is known that services seem to be back up, and the banks are saying that everything's fine. They conducted an investigation and things are up and running, but we don't really know exactly what happened here. So we're standing by to see if this could have been the result of some of these new powers being put into effect to like freeze the bank accounts of people who are suspected of being involved in this thing that's happening, or if it was some other sort of internal error attack or something like that. We don't really know yet. All we know is that there was a lot of very disruptive outages that made people very nervous because they couldn't access their assets online anymore.
Dang.
So moving on to the next, this one's just kind of dumb. So Firefox 100 is going to come out, and like companies are a little bit worried, especially browser companies, that the user agents here are going to break some websites that can't deal with with browser agents that have a number that is 3 digits instead of 2. Again, this sounds like a really, really stupid problem, but there is an issue with a trivial amount of websites where if you attempt to go to it with a user agent that is like Firefox 100 or Chrome 100, it just will not work properly. So, of course, if you want to fix this, you can just spoof your user agent. There's lots of different extensions that will allow you to do this if you're really finding that it's creating a problem. There are some other workarounds that are mentioned in this article, but I would just say fake your user agent. You can set it as anything. You could set it as a potato if you want.
This is just some weird Y2K, like, deja vu.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That's ridiculous that they don't have handling for something as simple as that, but yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's not every website. It's just a relatively small number of websites, but it is enough that they are trying to address this, because there will be people who are trying to use those websites that suddenly cannot get them to work, and they are going to be really confused. So yeah, a very funny, very weird, trivial internet problem that's probably going to cause some headaches for people that are attempting to visit a small amount of websites in the near future.
Nice.
All right, what do you got next?
Cool. So Microsoft Teams is being used to distribute malware.
All right.
Yeah.
Go on.
So apparently there's some unknown issue with Microsoft Teams that has not yet been disclosed, but apparently it's pretty easy for attackers to slip into certain Teams organizations and chats and stuff like that. And they're leveraging whatever issue this is in order to just drop malicious payloads or executables in conversations which people that are parts of these organizations are running. And the suggested way to defend against such attacks, which I find ridiculous, are encourage end users to reach out to IT when seeing an unfamiliar file. Implement protection that downloads all files in a sandbox and inspects them for malicious content. And deploy robust full suite security to secure all lines of business communications, including Teams.
I'm sorry,
I think that's...
if I reached out to IT every time I saw a file I didn't know what it was,
Yeah.
I would never stop talking to IT.
Yeah. Kind of scary that they don't know yet what this issue is, but apparently it seems to be quite prevalent, and this is being used in order to distribute malware.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So a much dumber attack over on my screen. It looks like there are a series of attackers who are impersonating CEOs in virtual meetings, which is a really, really bold attack that at least requires that you know like an internal distribution list or some other thing that would allow you to email a bunch of employees all at once. But what these attackers have been doing is basically making it so everybody in the company except the CEO would receive like a meeting link or something like that. They would show up and then they would just play like a horrible sound and be like, oops, sorry, my audio's not working, but I need everyone to send all the money to this account right here. Let's get this done in this meeting before everyone goes back to work. And this, again, a very ballsy attack. Like it requires you to impersonate somebody that everybody knows and is kind of afraid of and probably won't push back on when they say to do something. So these sorts of attacks are basically weaponizing the trust that's placed in the chief executive officer and using it to try to trick people into doing something in the moment that they know they probably shouldn't be doing, but they think they're getting specific authorization to do. So, remote work and remote offices have made it really difficult to establish people's identity sometimes. So getting a phishing email that contains a meeting link that looks like it's from your CEO is definitely a way that people can get tricked and have been tricked, at least the FBI is warning, into accidentally doing things they shouldn't do. But again, if somebody schedules a meeting with you, makes a horrible noise and says their audio isn't working, and then tells you that they need to send some sort of transfer to another computer or to another account, then you really should not do that. And you should be aware that these sorts of attacks are happening, and you should duplicate verification of who you're talking to before you do any sort of business transaction with like a screeching noise in a meeting.
I think that's awful. I love that.
But really, the sophistication here is kind of interesting. If they lack the technical sophistication to just break into the CEO's account, why not just send an email once they find a distribution list and a photo? This attack only means you need to find a photo of the CEO that they would be using for their profile image, and then also a distribution list. And that is a much lower bar than most attacks. So I'm constantly amazed by some of these attacks that allow relatively unsophisticated attackers to get away with huge gains that are, confidence scams, basically. You know, they manage to make you think you're talking to someone that you trust and then exploit that in order to get some sort of payday. So really a really interesting attack, and again, not very sophisticated, but at the same time, like pretty severe when it does work. All right, so also, huge surprise, the United States says that Russian state hackers breached defense contractors. I wonder why they would want to do that. Well, let's see. It's because they were in control of command control communications and combat systems, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting systems, weapons and missile deployment, vehicle and aircraft design, and of course, don't forget software development, data analytics, computers, and logistics. That's pretty much most of what the military does.
Yeah.
So obviously this is not good, and some of these Russian actors have been lurking in systems for around like 6 months or so and maintained and established persistence for long periods of time to exfiltrate data and monitor as much as they could. And this sort of sophisticated attack, of course, does damage the United States' position when it comes to keeping things secret and having supply chains that are secure. It's one of the problems with having so many contractors. Each one represents a new attack surface, and often these are highly prized targets of both watering hole attacks and direct assaults using zero-day vulnerabilities. So seeing this sort of attack is honestly not that surprising, because these contractors are definitely the kind of targets that a lot of energy is going to be put into attacking. All right, got anything else?
Yes, so popular e-cigarette store hacked to steal credit cards. Oh no! The other week it was, what was it, trolleys? No, what were those ridiculous things? What do mall cops ride on?
Segways.
Yeah, that. The other week it was Segways. Now it's popular e-cigarette stores. All right, so apparently the MageCart malware, or I think it's ransomware or something like that, but this refers to both the group that develops credit card skimmers and also the software they deploy. But apparently this credit card skimmer has been deployed across a vaping e-commerce store and has been used in order to grab user credentials, credit card details, other stuff like that. And it seems it's been persistent there as of February 5th. And you can see here that they obfuscate a whole bunch of JavaScript and other stuff like that that's able to sneak past detection and is used in order to grab some user information like their email address, their payment data, phone number, and other really juicy information. And I think this was
Telegram?
also... Yeah, they use Telegram in order to exfiltrate this.
Sneaky. I'm seeing a lot of both open source projects and malware use Telegram as like a command and control network lately, possibly because the API is like really easy to work with. But it's just odd that like Telegram keeps popping up as like a C2 network, or like as a way of exfiltrating data, or any sort of like hacker purpose. It's weird because I haven't seen any other communications platform as much as Telegram pop up in recent stories.
That's interesting. This is the first time I've seen it used for that. I thought that was pretty novel.
Large but obscure e-cig retailer.
Yeah. I wonder what's next. First it was Segways, now it's this.
Yeah, I know. Wow, they're
Yeah.
targeting all the mall activities.
Right?
Vaping and riding on Segways. What will the malls do?
Right?
All right, so over on my screen, we have some good news for security researchers targeting some things that are critical for most of us just on a daily basis. So the Linux kernel is certainly pretty critical, and also Kubernetes is used to run all sorts of really, really critical services. So Google is now just about doubling the zero-day rewards for security researchers that find these vulnerabilities. Now, of course, they also have their own Project Zero, where they set out to find vulnerabilities in these areas, but of course, contributing from the community is something that always should be encouraged, and it's great to see that the bounties on these super critical targets are going up and up. And in fact, they've already spent, I think it was $150,000 or so on a number of, $175,000 paid out just in the last 3 months for zero-day vulnerabilities. Well, that's 5 zero-day vulnerabilities and 2 one-day vulnerabilities. So a lot of these have gotten fixed really fast too, which is wonderful to hear. So obviously the point here is to get more vulnerabilities in faster, to get them fixed faster and make everything more secure. And I think companies putting up the money to make sure that researchers are interested in, attacking their products and figuring out where there are problems is the future of making sure that you have a robust series of people checking your product and making sure you know when there's a really critical problem. And of course, there's all sorts of internal company policies that need to be aligned with that to make sure the bugs get addressed promptly and aren't just kicked down the can. Because a lot of the time, these will be disclosed and still not fixed for up to a year out. So I believe that this sort of encouragement is what we really need to make sure that security researchers are paid well for really difficult to find vulnerabilities, because they impact tons of users, and otherwise they tend to be reported or paid off by companies that make exploits out of this, that we've seen a lot in the news lately. And that sort of unethical use of these zero-day vulnerabilities is a huge problem that this is also helping to combat. All right, and then speaking of emergency zero-day exploits, there is one that has been actively exploited in Chrome that is being updated very quickly. So this hasn't been pushed out, I believe, yet. But if you want to update immediately, you can go to Chrome menu, help, about Google Chrome, and then update it to the most recent version, which does have a mitigation of this. So it seems like this attack in the wild is currently limited, but any zero-day vulnerability with a high zero-day, with a high severity score is going to be something you want to keep an eye on. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of other details on this because it hasn't been fully, the patch hasn't been fully pushed out, and the attack so far has been limited. But it looks like it is a use after free in animation, which weirdly enough, like GIFs and that sort of thing have been a pretty popular attack surface for mobile devices recently. So it looks like browsers may also be a target for this sort of attack. Again, we don't have a lot of results yet back from this, or at least a lot of description of what the attack is really doing, because they're still in the process of mitigating this, and they need to make sure that it's fixed before really going into too much more detail. Alex?
Cool. So over here we have an exploit that was found in Magento, I don't know how to pronounce that, probably Magento, which is an open source e-commerce platform that's now owned by Adobe. I think they call it something else now. But apparently this is a remote code execution vulnerability that doesn't seem trivial to exploit, but it's due to an issue with input validation. So this can usually be something like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, or something else similar. They haven't disclosed exactly what causes the issue, although there has been a proof of concept that was released for this vulnerability. And e-commerce websites are obviously they're quite a popular thing to attack, as we saw earlier with like the e-cigarette store that's being targeted, or the Segway store, or other things like that. Just because it's easy to grab like user credentials and their payment details and stuff like that. They're usually fairly common for being targeted. But here you can see they haven't released the details quite yet, but this is a pretty dangerous vulnerability that might expose lots of sites that are using this framework.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Huh. All right, so we are running out of time, but I think this is probably the last story we will cover today. This is more information on Emotet, which has been around since 2014. So this piece of malware, just as it says, refuses to die because it has continually come back as a botnet. It's come back in all sorts of delivery mechanisms, and now it is spreading as an Excel macro, which is notable in part because it seems as though Microsoft is going to shut down this attack vector in the near future. I also love that the researchers at Palo Alto Networks have named their threat hunting unit Unit 2042, which sounds scary and a little ambiguous, but I guess I'll have to look up like what that means soon. Yes. But Unit 42 reports that Emotet's new attack chain has multiple stages, and it basically is pulling down an HTML application that will download other stages and execute the malware on the computer. It's a pretty interesting piece of malware, and frankly, like this has been evolving to have all sorts of new capabilities, and this is just a notable one in that it's using a super popular attack vector, and then it's doing some interesting obfuscation behind the scenes in order to propagate itself. So is Emotet spreading anything new? No, since 2014, that is what this has been doing. But the fact that it is developing new infection mechanisms and is actively maintained is pretty interesting and spells that this is probably not the last time we're going to see Emotet in the news.
I wonder what the other 41 units are up to.
That's what I'm saying. Like, which units report to who? Like, who's in charge? Is their chief like a general? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions I have for Unit 42. But either way, I think it's a cool name. It sounds like a cool organization. All right, so that is all we have time for today. I want to thank everybody in the chat who has been very lively today and contributed some great opinions. Also, make sure to check out next week's stream on Tuesday, where we're going to be live on the Hack5 channel, as well as the Security Forward channel, LinkedIn, and everywhere else we typically are. We're on Twitch, of course, as well. That'll be really fun, and we'll have tons of people in the stream. So if you want to make sure that your question gets answered, make sure to leave it on the Security Forward, Security FWD YouTube channel, or of course, you can always message me on Twitter at Kody Kinsey, and I will do my best to make sure your question gets answered on the stream. All right, that's all we have for today. Alex, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.